Hello and welcome to the Sprint 88 review of ManageIQ. Sprint that just ended Monday on June 18th. Tell you all about it. I will give an overview. Dan will give us a summary on the UI. Julian and Adam on the providers. Tina on Automate. Gregg T on platform. Gregg T available? Good. I know he's out in Europe today. And Chris B will update us on documentation. Next slide, please. So this sprint, across 92 repos, we had 362 pull requests merged. Are in the classic UI. About 20% are in the core repo. And the next biggest one is the testing and the docs. So a good mix. Next slide, please. This is the flow of PRs merged per sprint. So we had a little lull a few sprints ago, and now after the release of Geprindishvili 3, and now we're getting back on track to our previous numbers. So happy to see that. In terms of bugs versus enhancements versus other things, almost 40% were enhancements as we're working on Hammer. Almost 30% were bugs, and just a little bit of refactoring at 14%. Next slide, please. And this is the health of the repos. Most of the numbers are well, some on top are red. So on the main repo, looks like we took a little bit of a step backwards. On the classic UI repo, it looks like the numbers are improving. And then all the other ones, the numbers are roughly the same as they were. Happy to see that. And over to Dan.
Great. All right, so on the user interface side, with all the different repos that have UI stuff going on, there's 121 PRs. Quite a few bugs. There was some work on enhancements as well. Also, you notice there the technical debt is up a little bit. We've been trying to clean up a lot of the smaller things, and so a bunch of different PRs went in for that. On the bug side, got some fixes there where the reconfiguration data for network adapters will only now show up when it's supported. We wanted to make sure that the new user dialog component was used for service reconfiguration. There was a point where I think it was still calling the old ones, which are obsoleted now. Fixed the tree builder error in the default filters page. There was also in the dialogues, some selects were coming down with actual data that said which was selected, but they weren't showing up properly, so added a refresh once that stuff was initialized. And then we're now hiding the new network manager unless we have Nuage enabled. Next slide. On the enhancement side, we've added support for being able to print and export to PDFs for dashboard widgets, and also for the summary screens. The summary is rewritten to use client-side technology, so we were able to now use the client-side browser's PDF support to print things off. So you'll see more of that coming in the future. Also, there were 2 request subtabs in the product. Most of the product is designed so that there's specific RBAC features for each page, but this page happened to show up in 2 different areas, so it was a little confusing when you would turn on the support for that in RBAC in the features tree. So what we've done is split that out so that now you see it in both places and you can turn them on and off separately. The reconfigure screen now has the ability to attach ISOs to the CD or DVD drives. Got a new dashboard view for the physical infrastructure provider. And in V2V, we can now archive plans, and there's a new compound expansion for the infrastructure mappings for UI. Next slide. So quickly, some screenshots here. Here's if you're on a widget, you can actually in the little ellipsis menu on the top right, you can actually print or export to PDF. You'll see that there. You can give that a try. Next slide. Here in the features tree, under infrastructure, you can see requests, and also under automation, you can see requests. It seems like it's cut off on this page for me, but it is on the slides. Next slide. Being able to attach ISOs to the DD drives when you're doing a reconfigure. So that's kind of cool. Next slide. In the V2V, you can now archive migration plans, and you can see there that this one's kind of trying to warn you that, by the way, there's some VMs that didn't get migrated, so if you archive this, you won't be able to restart those. Next slide. So I saw this slide, and I was like, no way I could explain it. So Aparna has kindly offered to demo this for us because she says it's a lot easier to understand live. I left the screenshot in here anyway, but go ahead, Aparna.
Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. All right, are you able to see my screen? All right, so one of the enhancements added this sprint was how we show the data in this infrastructure mappings list view. Now, to get an idea what an infrastructure mapping is, let's quickly create one. So I'm gonna get a quick mapping here. The source cluster in the V2V context is always VMware, and the target is Rev. So I go ahead and create a mapping for the clusters. Next is data store. Let me just randomly pick something for the demo. Network. And there, the mapping has been created, and it's here in the list view. Now, this is kind of an unconventional looking list view, and I would say a fairly new design in Patternfly. And it's called a list with compound expansion, and these are the compound items. So it's a expandable, collapsible list view, and when I expand on each of these items, I see a little summary of that item underneath right here in the list view. So simple one-to-one mappings between source data stores, target data stores, source clusters, target clusters. I have another here. And these are just simple one-to-one mappings. And this one shows associated plans. Now, this one is a more complex one, and it is a series of many to one mappings between source and target networks. So what is nice about this list view, I think, is there's no drill down necessary. You can just click right here in the list view and get the summary information, and which also means you don't have to navigate to a new screen. Everything's available right here, and which also means no extra UI routes from a developer's point of view. And that's it. So just a nice visual representation, a nice illustration right here in the list view to get a better understanding of how things are mapped under the hood. Good. Back to you, Dan.
Thanks, Aparna. And I think that's it for the UI. So whoever's next.
Second.
Turn back to the president.
Okay.
Over to the providers.
Hi, so this is Julian. Welcome to the providers. As you can see, our provider screen is filling up with icons, so we're slowly getting more and more providers, which has been really, really great. So the next slide, please. We've had a total of 48 PRs across all of the providers this sprint, with Redfish having the most, followed by Azure, and jointly third by Lenovo, Nuage, and Overt. Next slide, please. This sprint, we've actually had a few overarching PRs going across all of the repositories, both in terms of enhancements and refactoring. So in terms of refactoring, Adam created a core PR where he removed the EMS refresh mix into the base refresher, which has meant now that we've got lots of unneeded code in the provider. So he's slowly been removing that from all the repositories. And as we know, less code is good code. And Martin has refactored the inventory collection to allow us to have a new API for creating and defining inventory from the persister. And the good thing is it shouldn't result in any API or code changes for any of the providers. In terms of enhancements, Milan has added a method to display the flavor names for Amazon, Azure, and Google in the UI. Now getting over to the Amazon provider, Alex has added the ability to handle EBS snapshot events. So now we can trigger things like automate in relation to EBS events from CloudWatch. Next slide. Dan B has been fixing bugs in Azure this sprint. He's fixed a bug where we were mistakenly storing the root disk size and the swap disk size in kilobytes and not bytes. Now we should get the correct results on this in the UI for that. He's also added a check where we had providers that weren't supporting managed disks and images, and that was causing refresh to fail. And so with that check now, it doesn't fail anymore. So specifically, it was the Iowa region that was causing that issue. And another sprint, another update to Google Fog, but this time it was because Google made a breaking change, and luckily Tomas found that, and he was able to fix the actual Fog Google gem itself. That's resulted in us upgrading from version 1.33 to version 1.5, and that's fixed a few other bugs that we had in the Fog gem. And last but not least is Nuage. This sprint has been good. They've had a couple of enhancements. Miha cleaned up some superfluous keys in the settings YAML, and he's also changed the VSD client so that the headers reset on each API call unless explicitly specified. That's it for cloud providers. Over to Adam.
Thanks, Julian. On the OpenStack side this sprint, as we mentioned, there's a new SDK or new API for defining the inventory collection. So OpenStack moved to that new API. That was one of the platforms that we used to test the API. They also fixed the flavor names that were used for the new PDF summary. Lenovo actually added the final PR to parse physical storage. So in previous sprints, they added the schema change and the core save inventory code, and this time they added the parser for the refresher. They also added physical switch power operations. So now through the API, you can power on and power off physical switches that are connected to a Lenovo rack. The overt side, the notable change now is that graph refresh is enabled by default again after the previous sprints work to clean up the performance issues that were there. So now that's going to be enabled for properly for the next release. And next slide, and over to James for an Ansible workflow demonstration.
Yeah, so this sprint would add the support to integrate with Ansible Tower workflow for the external tower provider. So this demo will show the refresh to inventory the workflows, and also that we can launch a workflow from ManageIQ. It's done now just through the console. And
There we go.
okay. So this is the provider. You get back the workflow count, which is 0 for now, and then you start a refresh. Gonna take a little bit of time to get back, and we're gonna take a look at the one of the workflow on the tower UI. Oops.
Looks like we have a problem with YouTube.
Okay. And pretend you're seeing a workflow on the Tower UI, which is actually a container containing multiple job templates within it. in this demo, it's called demo workflow that we are looking for. And now see that refresh is done. When you type back the ask for the workflow count, now it shows 4 of them. And then you could look for a particular one that is, we have its name called demo workflow. Once you locate it.
Let's try one more time.
Okay, now refresh again.
I know there's going to be 4 of them.
Spoilers.
Kind of.
Best demos ever.
Shadow puppet.
All right. Okay. So this is the UI, Tower UI view. So the demo workflow is the one that we want to play with. Now, after refresh, look at the count is 4, and then we try to locate the one that has the name demo workflow that we intend to play with. So once you got it, you try to run it, it will fail because you don't supply enough. You can look at the service spec, which actually tell us that we need a input the value for name. So once I provide the extra vars with the name, you could launch it successfully. And now if you go back to the UI of Tower, you can see that the workflow is running. And running state, within it, you can see 3 templates are in it. First one is now running. You go back to our Manage IU console, you can look at the status and check whether it's finished or not, which is, I think it's done in this case, yes. So the blinking is gone, it means it's done. And then you could also look at the status, which is successful. If you go back to here, you can see all the 2 job template are green. And that's it for them. And then the UI team and the Automate team is working to implement on top of the backend provide user interface.
All right, thanks, James. That was awesome. And now we have Gregor from XLab to present the Redfish Provider.
Okay, thank you, Adam. So since this is a new provider, I'll start with a short introduction into the provider, or what the Redfish actually is. It's a sort of physical infrastructure provider currently supporting the compute part, similar to what Nuage's Clarity is doing. Contrary to Clarity, it's based on open source, open industry standard specification, meaning that all the major hardware vendors are actually supporting or will be supporting this specification in the end to manage the physical infrastructure. It's RESTful API towards the infrastructure. It supports inventory, power-ups, provisioning currently, and it's been extended with, to some extent, storage. And in the end, probably also the networking part will be more tightly integrated into Redfish. Some resources, also a quick blog post that we did to introduce this, because in order to start working with the provider, there are some subtleties that needs to be handled. Oh, next slide, please. So the current status, this has been, I think, for 2 sprints now, Redfish Provider, but since we forgot it last time, we will present the full status today. So we have the graph-based inventory refresh. We have all the supported inventory items are already in the provider. We'll be extending once we have full access to the test that system. There are basic power operations, basic LED operation. We can now blink the LEDs on the systems, which sounds funny, I guess, but yeah, once we are working on large systems, indicating a system through the LED operations makes a lot of sense. So there are plenty of projects supporting this. One is the client gem, because there is no Redfish support for that. And then for the QE in particular as well, for the development and testing, we have some mockups and recordings basically allowing everybody to test the Redfish without having access to the full physical system. Next slide, please. So there are three screenshots just showing this is a simple single server node showing the data about a single system. Next slide. Then there are some LED operations and also the status of these operations. Once you manage to change status, it will also update through targeted refresh. Next slide, please. And these are the power operations that are currently supported with this Redfish provider. I think that's it for the Redfish.
All right, let's next slide over to Tina for Automate.
Thanks, Adam. So we had 27 PRs merged this sprint. For V2V, Fabian had made an enhancement to restore the VM power state post-transformation and to set insecure connection as the target provider default. Lucy worked on an enhancement to prevent a transformed VM from starting. The changes include tagging a migrated VM, exposing the marked VM migrated method to automate, and adding a new built-in policy to prevent the start of the transformed VM. Excuse me, next slide, please. So the ongoing dialog work, Eric resolved the service reconfigure issue where the dialog values weren't properly displayed, and an issue where the values weren't displayed when the dialog loads and instead showed nothing selected. TrueU fixed a find-specific issue where a dialog that contained a required field was able to be submitted. For retirement, TrueU fixed a retirement as a request to make request issue, and Billy Fitz changed all of the start retirement methods to not require the retirement state to be initialized, reverting a recent change. Lucy exposed host failure events by adding and raising policy events for host failures. Next slide, and over to Gregg.
Thanks, Tina. On the platform side, we got 24 PRs merged this sprint. Handful of enhancements here. One of significance is enhancement in chargeback performance. It actually was done as a bug, but I put it as an enhancement because it's a pretty big improvement. So Libor did a pretty big refactoring job to improve the overall memory usage and time it takes to generate a report, chargeback report. You can look at the numbers there. It's pretty. I think they speak for themselves. He just at high level, he basically had it return just the values that we need. We're only caching the actual values, not the full objects, and that makes a huge improvement. Also, Yuri did some work on settings. So he added the ability to reset settings to a default value because that's something that you couldn't do because you couldn't save a node on top of through the advanced settings. Just note that this is still in progress. Jason is doing some follow-up work, so there's another PR to come. So I'll talk about that next sprint. And LJ added a tool to remove grouping from report results, but I should mention there's a missing PR on here that Nick Lamuro did. So we had a performance issue returning and rendering report results. And in doing research into the issue, we realized that we save a serialized version of the report object, and that has some artifacts of the report generation in it, including the grouping stuff. And for chargeback, the way we actually consolidate on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis is by using grouping. So it's particularly hard on chargeback. So Joe made the tool to remove that. Nick made a change to no longer save all that stuff in the serialized object to address that issue. But the tool can be used if there's a case where the results are loading too slowly or don't load at all because of this. Next slide, please. Brendan is doing some work on the scheduling. It's for V2V so that when a V2V transformation job is scheduled, it's using proper schedule and not using the queue deliver on time. And this is going to allow for cancellation. So there's another PR that is still being worked on that will come in. Talk about that next sprint. But right now on the schedule, he enhanced it so that you can actually just call a method on a single target directly. The way it's currently working and it's still supported is that targets are dynamically bound at the time of schedule fire so that basically the targets can change based on a filter. This wasn't a good fit for the V2V work that they needed. And a small change to fix off based on some struggles that I think LJ and Jared had at one time trying to run fix off. We passed the -B option to it, thinking we were passing a database, but it was a dry run, but we didn't know that it was that, and it just wasn't working. So he just added some output to tell you when you're running a dry run. And bug fix wise, Brandon made a fix to allow duplicate nil pixie image types during seeding for the current region. This actually is a fix fixes a bug that actually prevented an upgrade because the seeding was failing on validation. That's a pretty significant issue. And that's all I got for platform. Next slide, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Hi, for documentation in Sprint 88, we had a total of 19 PRs merged, 15 of which were enhancements and 4 of which addressed bugs. Some highlights of those PRs were number 868, where we updated the Amazon EC2 provider permissions, 867, where we added a new procedure on enabling Amazon events, 881, where we added some modifications to creating a chargeback report, and 873, which is a nice workflow example that Suyag did, which is for creating a service for provisioning a VM through Red Hat virtualization. That's it for documentation.
Okay, and that brings us to the close of the Sprint 88. We'll be back in 2 weeks and 1 day because it's 4th of July. It's holiday, so next Sprint review on a Thursday, July 5th. You all done? Thank you very much, everyone.